Killdozer, June 4th, 2004. Granby, Colorado. The sun crested over the jagged peaks of the Rockies, casting a warm, amber glow over the sleepy streets of Granby. The town stirred slowly, as it always did. The early risers, the bakery owner setting out her fresh loaves, the gas station attendant with his styrofoam cup of black coffee, moved like clockwork. To the untrained eye, it was a day like any other. But in a steel and cinder block shed at the edge of town, beneath the low whir of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of diesel, Marvin Heemeyer was finishing something he would never have the chance to build again. He stood over the machine, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool mountain air drifting in from the cracked window. The Komatsu D355A sat before him like a slumbering beast, hulking, armored, brooding. It had taken him 18 months of meticulous planning, countless sleepless nights, and nearly every dime he had. And now it was complete. Marvin's gloved hands moved with practiced precision. He tightened the final bolts on the armored shell encasing the cab, then stepped back and ran a calloused hand along the cold steel. Reinforced with layers of concrete and ballistic steel, the armor was impenetrable to anything short of military-grade weapons. There were cameras mounted in protective housings and hooked to monitors inside the cockpit, air systems to blow dust off the lenses, backup oxygen, gun ports. He had thought of everything. As he admired the last weld, still glowing faintly where the torch had sealed it, Marvin let out a long breath. He wasn't smiling. His expression was heavy, contemplative, almost mournful. A cassette recorder sat on the workbench nearby, already spooled with hours of his confessions, thoughts, and justifications. He clicked the red button. "Well," he said, his voice gravelly and flat, "this is it. If you're hearing this, then I went through with it. I didn't want to. God knows I prayed for another way. But they left me none." He looked at the calendar on the wall. June 4th. He had circled the date in red marker a month ago. From the corner, a dog barked. His old shepherd mix, Gus, stirred in his sleep but didn't rise. Marvin crossed the garage and knelt beside him. "Won't be long now, boy," he whispered, scratching the dog's ear. "You be good. You won't understand what happens next, and maybe that's for the best." He stood again and walked to the far wall, where an American flag hung, dusty and faded. For a moment, he simply stared at it. Then, as if the weight of time itself had lifted, he climbed into the cab of the Dozer. The hatch sealed shut with a final, echoing clang. Inside, it was dark, tight, but familiar. He flipped a series of switches. Lights blinked to life on the control panel. Monitors flickered. The engine rumbled. The monster breathed. He pressed the intercom button and muttered almost to himself, "Granby, you brought this on yourselves." The walls of the shed trembled as the Dozer lurched forward, its steel snout pressing against the wall Marvin had weakened weeks earlier for just this moment. Concrete crumbled. Rebar snapped. Daylight flooded into the space as the Komatsu punched through. Marvin squinted at the brightness, then focused on the road ahead. His jaw clenched. The machine was ready, and so was he. There was no turning back. The story of Marvin Heemeyer didn't begin with rage. It began with hope. A quiet, workman's hope that in America, with enough grit and sweat, you could carve out a place for yourself. That was what Marvin believed when he first came to Granby in the early 1990s. He was a welder by trade, a skilled one, and with the money he'd made from a successful muffler shop in nearby Boulder, he bought a few acres on the edge of town. He set up a garage, parked his snowmobiles, and got to work. "Place has potential," he told his friend Cody DeChef the day they first walked the property together. "Mountain air. Good folks. A man could build something here." For a while, it was good. Marvin became a familiar face around town. He fixed exhaust pipes, welded busted trailer hitches, and always had a story to tell. He was the kind of man who'd lend you a wrench and help you use it. But beneath the friendly grin, Marvin kept his world tightly controlled. He lived alone, worked long hours, and he didn't take kindly to being told no. The trouble began with a concrete plant. In 1992, Mountain Park Concrete, run by the very same Cody DeChef, expressed interest in building a batch plant on a plot of land adjacent to Marvin's property. At first, Marvin thought it was a joke. "You're telling me they're going to build that damn eyesore next to my shop?" Marvin growled to his friend Trish, the waitress at the local diner. She shrugged. "Guess the town says it's good for business. More jobs and all." Marvin slammed his coffee down. "To hell with their jobs. What about my driveway? I won't even be able to get a customer's car out without dragging it through cement dust." He filed complaints, petitions, letters to the zoning board. At every meeting, he spoke with a passion that slowly turned into venom. But Granby was a small town, and its gears often turned with the weight of long-standing relationships and unwritten favors. In 2001, the plant was approved. That was the turning point. Marvin stewed. His shop's access road was effectively cut off. Trucks came and went from the plant at all hours, spraying gravel and dust onto his property. He saw it as a betrayal, not just by the town officials, but by Granby itself. "They buried me," he said one evening to his tape recorder, the machine capturing the low rumble of his voice. "They lined up every goddamn bureaucrat they could find and stuck a knife in my back." His legal battles continued. He tried to get an easement. Denied. He tried to sell the property to the town at a premium to cover his losses. Rejected. He even bought a second lot, hoping to maneuver around the access issue. But the town blocked that too. That's when something broke. He stopped fighting the town with paperwork. He stopped going to meetings. He stopped being Marvin the welder, Marvin the helpful neighbor. Instead, he started disappearing into his garage. Neighbors noticed the change. They saw lights on late into the night, heard the clatter of metal, the spark of torches. "Hey, you working on a big rig in there or something?" a local boy asked him once, peeking through the chain-link fence. Marvin smiled thinly. "Something like that." Inside, the Komatsu D355A sat like a sleeping dragon. He had bought it at auction for $19,000. A steal. Piece by piece, he transformed it, like a sculptor chipping away at marble until the shape within emerged. He documented everything: his anger, his motives, his purpose. "This isn't vengeance," he recorded. "It's accountability. They broke the rules, not me. I gave them every chance to do right. This isn't my fault." He welded day after day, layering steel over concrete, testing camera feeds, building air systems, and adding small ports for his .50 caliber and .223 rifles. It became his mission, his penance, his destiny. And though he never told another soul the full extent of what he was doing, his tone changed. His voice when he spoke to people carried the weight of a man who no longer belonged among them. "They'll listen," he muttered one night, grinding down a steel plate. "One way or another, they'll hear what I have to say." The clock on the dashboard read 3:42 p.m. Inside the sealed cockpit of the armored Komatsu, Marvin Heemeyer sat alone, encased in steel and concrete, surrounded by dim camera feeds and the soft hum of the engine. The oxygen system hissed softly beside him. The monitors flickered, 7 of them in total, each broadcasting grainy black and white footage from outside the tank. Bulletproof glass protected the cameras, and an air compressor rigged to blast dust from the lenses ensured they stayed clear. He tightened his gloved hand around the joystick that controlled the Dozer's movements. Everything was in place. Every circuit tested, every panel reinforced. He took a slow, deep breath and reached toward the cassette recorder, bolted beside the instrument panel. "This is the day," he said, his voice low and unshaking. "June 4th. God's will be done." He reached forward, pressed a button, and the beast roared to life. The vibration of the engine rattled the steel walls. Tools on a rack trembled and fell. The walls of the garage quivered. The front blade of the Dozer eased forward. Its steel teeth scraped against the concrete floor, sending sparks into the dim garage light. Marvin spoke into the recorder again. "They'll see. The whole town will see. I didn't want this, but they forced my hand." He nudged the controls. With a guttural groan, the 85-ton machine began rolling forward, heading toward the weakened wall of the garage. Weeks earlier, Marvin had scored the cinder blocks and removed rebar in strategic places. Now the wall crumbled like wet plaster as the bulldozer pushed through. Outside, on the edge of town, people turned toward the sound. "What the hell is that?" muttered Rick Anderson, a retired mechanic working on his truck across the street. His daughter Ellie pointed toward the cloud of dust. Something's coming out of Marvin's shop. The crowd grew. Bystanders pulled out cell phones. Shop owners stepped onto sidewalks. At first, people thought it was some strange industrial job. Maybe Marvin was demolishing the place himself. But the sight of the armored bulldozer emerging from the debris stopped everyone cold. The dozer was monstrous. The cab fully enclosed with thick gray armor, the windows sealed with steel and glass nearly 3 inches thick. No driver visible, just cameras, just metal, just power. It turned left onto Southeast Avenue and picked up speed, slow but deliberate. Marvin steered, steadily watching the monitors, guiding his creation with purpose. Inside the dozer, Marvin muttered as he drove. They took everything. Every chance I gave them, they threw it back in my face. This is the only language they understand now. His first target loomed ahead, the Mountain Park concrete plant. Dust rolled from the treads as the dozer hit the chain-link fence at the property line and didn't stop. It flattened the metal effortlessly, then crushed a flatbed trailer and rolled over a pile of pallets like they were matchsticks. Cody DeChef, owner of the plant and Marvin's longtime adversary, was inside the office when the first explosion of sound hit. His secretary screamed, "Is that? Oh my God, is that Marvin?" Cody ran to the window and froze. The dozer plowed through the storage building like it was cardboard. "Call the cops!" Cody yelled, grabbing his phone with shaking hands. Back inside the cab, Marvin's jaw clenched. The monitors showed the destruction. Concrete exploded. Steel beams bent and snapped. He pressed forward, not slowing. It was surgical, not random. He knew exactly where to go. Police arrived minutes later, sirens howling. Officers leapt from cruisers and drew weapons. "Who the hell's in there?" Officer Ramirez shouted. "Marvin Heemeyer," came the reply from the dispatch radio. "It's gotta be him." Shots rang out, pistols first, then rifles. But the bullets pinged harmlessly off the armored shell. It was a mobile bunker, a tank. The .50 cal gun port on the rear swiveled, but Marvin didn't fire yet. He didn't need to. He pressed onward. Next stop, the town hall. As he rolled through the streets, people screamed and scattered. Cars screeched to a halt. Some bystanders filmed with shaky hands. One man shouted, "Get the kids inside!" The dozer crashed through the doors of town hall. Wood splintered. Drywall flew. Desks and file cabinets toppled like dominoes. Alarms screamed. Inside, Marvin's breathing was steady, his voice recorded in a slow growl. "They took my voice. Now I'll take theirs." Then he moved on. The newspaper office, the former mayor's home, the hardware store, all crushed under the relentless weight of steel and fury. And still, the bullets could not touch him. Overhead, helicopters circled. SWAT arrived. Explosives were discussed, even considered. But there was no clean shot, no way to breach the armor. Marvin had built a fortress. Yet even fortresses have limits. Smoke drifted like ghosts above the fractured skyline of Granby. Buildings smoldered, windows shattered, dust hanging in the air like a curtain drawn over the town's future. As the modified Komatsu Dozer rumbled forward, it left behind not just crushed structures, but the echo of disbelief, shockwaves rippling through the hearts of everyone watching. The police were no longer responding with just service pistols and rifles. The local force had called for assistance. State troopers, SWAT teams, and eventually even a National Guard liaison arrived on scene. But what could they do? Every round fired bounced off Marvin's makeshift tank like pebbles off a freight train. Inside the cockpit, Marvin sat in a dark cocoon of steel and concrete, only the blue-green glow of the monitors illuminating his stern face. His jaw worked slowly as he chewed on a granola bar, unfazed by the shaking of the machine. "They're still shooting?" he muttered into the recorder. "Idiots, they still don't understand. This isn't about destruction, it's about correction." He reached out and adjusted one of the camera feeds, bringing the image of the Gamble family home into sharper focus. "Gary Gamble, zoning board, told me I was being unreasonable," he growled, "told me to be more flexible. Well, Gary, let's see how flexible your foundation is." With a grind of gears and a rev of the engine, The Dozer advanced on the modest two-story house. People screamed in the distance. Across town, Sheriff Glenn Traynor stood on the hood of his cruiser with a pair of binoculars. "What's he doing now?" asked Officer Hayes, sweating and red-faced. "Headed to Gamble's place," Traynor said grimly. "Same as the others. Anyone who crossed him." "What do we do?" Traynor lowered the binoculars. "We pray he runs out of fuel before he runs out of names." The Dozer turned and headed for the town library, not because it held records or officials, but because it was the one building that had hosted the final zoning hearing that denied Marvin his appeal. Inside, librarian Janice Keller had just helped two teenagers out the back door. "Go! Get to the school. They've got people helping there." "What about you, Miss Keller?" "I'll be fine. I've seen tornadoes. I've seen blizzards. I'll—" A deafening crash interrupted her. The front wall caved in as the Dozer's blade punched through bookshelves and beams. Janice ducked behind the checkout desk as dust filled the air. The floor vibrated under her knees. Then the sound shifted, retreating. When she peeked over the splintered wood, she saw the rear of the behemoth trundling away, toward the next target. The town was unraveling. Back at command, Sheriff Traynor held a radio to his mouth. "Where's that damn front loader?" "We've got one coming in from Kremling," said the dispatcher. "ETA 5 minutes." "Good. We'll box him in. Or try to." On the monitor, the Dozer reached the Gamble house. Marvin guided it with careful precision. No wasted motion, no frenzy. Just purpose. The blade bit into the siding and pushed through drywall like it was soggy paper. The structure buckled. Inside the cab, Marvin's voice was low, almost reverent. "This is for every time they looked me in the eye and lied." Suddenly, the frame shuddered. A powerful thud echoed from the rear. Then another. A massive front-end loader had arrived and was ramming the side of the Dozer. "Get him pinned!" shouted a trooper on the radio. The two machines collided again, the Dozer tilting slightly. But Marvin had reinforced his treads and adjusted for weight distribution. He reversed with a surge of power, then spun and shoved the loader aside. The operator inside it yelled in panic as his machine was thrown back. Marvin exhaled slowly. "They think this is a game. They don't know how far I'm willing to go." Another shot rang out, this time a high-caliber round from a sniper on the roof of the fire station. It hit the steel just inches from one of the camera housings. Marvin flinched. "Close," he muttered. "Too close." He hit a button, and one of the gun ports opened. He fired a warning shot. The sniper ducked, and then, like thunder rumbling across the valley, the Dozer moved forward again. The town had tried everything, and Marvin still had not stopped. But ahead of him now stood the Gamble hardware store. Its thick foundation, older construction, a tougher nut to crack. He didn't hesitate. As he pushed into the facade, the walls groaned. The steel whined. A sound echoed inside the cockpit. Something different. Grinding, cracking. Something was wrong. He leaned toward the monitors. The left tread was caught, wedged between a collapsed concrete slab and a sunken patch of old flooring. He reversed. The Dozer shuddered but didn't move. Inside, Marvin narrowed his eyes. "So this is it," he whispered. "This is where it ends." Smoke poured through the broken foundation as Marvin's beast shuddered in place. Inside the cockpit, the vibration of metal on stone echoed through the armored shell. The left tread groaned under the stress of being wedged into the jagged collapse beneath the Gamble hardware store. For the first time in hours, Marvin paused, not to think, but to feel. Not fear, not defeat, just stillness. He looked at the monitors. Static flickered across the bottom left feed. The dust was thick, making visibility poor even with the air compression jets. A fine film of grit coated the camera lenses. He adjusted a dial, then another, trying to reverse the beast out of its concrete trap. The machine growled, fought back. He pressed harder on the hydraulic lever, inching the Dozer's massive weight backward. Nothing. Again, still nothing. Inside the fortress of steel and concrete, Marvin Heemeyer sighed. "Well," he said into the recorder, voice low and tired, "looks like we're stuck. I figured it might end this way." He leaned back against the reinforced seat, his body aching. Hours of tension had worn him down. His knuckles were white from gripping the controls. Sweat dampened his undershirt, and his jaw throbbed from clenching. "They didn't stop me," he said softly. "I stopped me. The old concrete, the foundation, fitting, really." Outside, emergency responders took cover behind cruisers, concrete barriers, and buildings. They waited. No one dared approach yet. "He's not moving," a state trooper reported over the radio. "The machine's dead in the hole." "Is he out?" asked Sheriff Trainer, crouched behind the town hall ruins. "No movement. No shots. Just smoke. Keep eyes on. I don't want anyone rushing in until we know he's finished." Inside the Dozer, Marvin flipped off the ignition switch. The hum of the machine fell silent. The air grew still. He reached over and clicked the recorder one final time. "I was always a reasonable man, but reason only works when the other side listens." They didn't listen. This was never about violence. It was about justice. My kind of justice. He looked down at a framed photograph taped beside one of the monitors. It showed his father beside a small airplane. Marvin in his 20s, smiling, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I really tried." He reached behind the seat into a welded steel box, pulled out a single revolver, held it for a long moment, then one final sound. A single shot echoed inside the machine. Muffled. Final. Outside, a boom rolled across the block. Then silence. A minute passed. Then two. Sheriff Trainer stepped forward slowly, holding a bullhorn. "Marvin," he called. "It's over. Come out. No one else has to get hurt." Silence. He waved to the SWAT team. They approached the wreckage cautiously. Welders and cutting tools were brought in. It took nearly an hour to get through the steel-reinforced plating. When they finally breached the hull, the smell of burnt metal and oil flooded out. And there, slumped over the controls, was Marvin Heemeyer, a man who had built a fortress, a man who had tried and failed to be heard, a man who became legend. The rampage lasted 2 hours and 7 minutes. 13 buildings damaged or destroyed. Miraculously, no civilians were killed. Only one casualty, Marvin himself. In the days that followed, opinions divided like cracked pavement. "He was a monster," said Cody DeChef, voice shaking in a television interview. "He could have burned the whole town down." "He was a prophet," argued an anonymous caller to a Denver radio show. "They buried him in red tape. What was he supposed to do?" Granby rebuilt, but it never forgot. And beneath the layers of asphalt and fresh paint, under the new buildings and the carefully manicured lawns, the memory of June 4th, 2004, lingered like a scar. Some called it madness. Some called it martyrdom. But in the cockpit of that iron giant, Marvin Heemeyer called it justice. The sun rose slowly over Granby, Colorado, casting long shadows across rebuilt streets and newly laid sidewalks. The town bore the scars of that day, not on its buildings, many of which had been replaced or repaired, but in the way people spoke in hushed tones when June approached, in the silence that fell when Marvin Heemeyer's name came up. The old lot where Mountain Park concrete once stood was now an empty gravel space. A simple metal fence encircled it, no signs, no plaques, just absence. Sheriff Glenn Trainer stood at the edge of that fence on the anniversary, his hat pressed tight in his hands. "It never gets easier," he said quietly. Beside him, Officer Dana Hayes nodded. "You think people really understand what happened?" Trainer squinted into the distance. "They understand what they want to. Some see a terrorist. Others see a man pushed too far. But only a few of us saw the full thing. The man behind the machine." Hayes crossed her arms. "We never found his full tape, right? Number just fragments. They say he mailed copies. One made it to a cousin in South Dakota. Another turned up in a Denver news station's mailbox weeks later. None aired the full recording." A gust of wind blew across the gravel, whistling between the fence posts. A few blocks away, Janice Keller rearranged books inside the rebuilt town library. The foundation was deeper this time, reinforced, modernized, and still she swore she could hear the rumble of treads whenever it rained. She turned to a young patron, a boy no older than 12. "You know," she said, dusting off a spine, "there was a time this building wasn't here." He looked up at her, curious. "Really, what happened?" Janice hesitated, then smiled. "Long story. Maybe check out the local history section." He wandered off, and Janice stared at the floor for a moment, remembering the shaking, the sound of bookshelves crashing, the sight of that monster tearing through her world. Cody DeChef, now older, grayer, and walking with a cane, gave an interview every June to the local paper. This year, a young reporter named Lacey took the assignment. "Mr. Dachev," she said, recorder on the table between them, "how did you feel watching your business be destroyed?" Cody took a long breath, adjusted his glasses. "It was more than my business," he said slowly. "It was my life. My father helped build it. My son worked there summers. Marvin didn't just kill concrete, he crushed trust." Lacey leaned forward. "Did you ever try to reconcile with him?" "I tried," Cody said, "more than once. But Marvin was convinced we were enemies, that the town was out to get him. We weren't. We just didn't see what he was really going through." He looked out the window. "Maybe we should have." Meanwhile, across the internet, a different narrative grew. Forums and YouTube videos called Marvin a folk hero. People dissected every minute of the rampage, pointed to documents, zoning maps, minutes from town hall meetings. Conspiracies spread. In a podcast studio in Boulder, a host named Jana Ramos recorded her weekly segment. Today marks 21 years since the Killdozer incident. Some call it justice, some call it madness. But the real story isn't in the steel or the destruction, it's in the silence that led there. She sipped her coffee and continued. Heemeyer's story is a warning about what happens when a man feels like the system stops listening, about what people do when bureaucracy becomes a brick wall. I'm not saying what he did was right, but I am saying we should never ignore the cracks before the dam breaks. At the edge of town where the mountains began to rise, there's a trail that leads to a lookout point. Marvin used to ride up there on his snowmobile. From there, the whole of Granby is visible, a tiny spread of rooftops, spires, and trees. Some say they've seen someone up there, standing quiet, staring down at the town. Others say that's just imagination. But one thing is certain, Granby was never the same again, and the machine Marvin built, the fury it embodied, remains a whisper in the wind, a growl in the earth.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe for more great short story audiobooks.